I'm wondering if you would want to share some about your history with Rosen, how you found the modality.
Yeah, my wife started doing the training and became a regular client of Marion. And then Marion offered that me and my wife could go to her cabin in Colombia. Did you know she had a cabin in Colombia? Okay,
I had no idea.
up by Sonora in the foothills. Anyway, when we got there, I noticed a leak on her water supply line under the house. And I think there was a roof leak at the same time or whatever. Anyway, I did some repairs on both things. And then the next time my wife saw Marion, she told Marion that we had done these repairs at the house. And Marion said, "Well, I want to meet this guy." And so, so I scheduled a session with her, and from there on, became a regular client of hers as well. Um, I don't know if you know, but Isolde Jacobs was Marion's scheduler, and she was a scheduler and pretty much a gatekeeper, and that Marion's getting up in age, and she didn't really want to take on any new clients. Um, And so she told my wife, said, being that, I'm seeing, you and Hursey at the same time, said, uh, I may need to cut back, and maybe you can come less often or, let's, work with Hursey for a while. So um, my wife was a little careful about what she asked for after that, 'cause she didn't get to see much of Marion, but I think I was getting sessions probably once a month with her, or so, and she encouraged me to take the training. Um, and one of her motivations, I don't know if you knew, was that she thought more men should be introduced to this work. And she had the idea that is quite common is that, you know, you can declare this as women's work if you like, but you know, we're only strong as our weakest link, and that was her thought is that men need to be introduced to this work as well, to make sure that, the work, gets a wide range of people and, making sure that the work is incorporated in both men and women. It's a way of confirming that this work is not just for women, but it's for everyone. It's for everyone, can benefit from. And so that's how I was introduced to Rosa Method. The rest is history. I became a practitioner of the bodywork, and then later on became a Rosa movement teacher, trained with Gene Malik in Monterey, and then also uh, got a certification for introductory bodywork training, teaching as well. Yeah.
I re- I remember hearing that Marion really had a heart for bringing men into the work, both as practitioners and clients.
Hmm. Yeah.
What what was your experience about how how she taught the work? Was there anything unique about how she taught the work versus how it's being taught now?
Um, well, her way of teaching the work was seen to evolve in a certain way in her later years. Um, and in the beginning, I think there were other teachers and senior teachers, that had ideas of their own in a way to teach the work, because Marion in the beginning didn't think she could teach the work. She, and her thinking, from what I gather from that is that each individual come to the work in their own way. And, I mean, you can teach, some of the ethics of the Rosen method, much like massage, in that, you want to make sure that it's a safe environment. You want to make sure that you take care of yourself while you're doing the work. But far as technique, I think Marion focused pretty heavily on, you know, being confident that what your work is doing makes a difference. And also being confident that, the way you touch someone is communicated through you, the way of connecting with people. And there's no real right or wrong about, how you connect with people. Um, you know, um, and so, and then in later years, there was a difference in the assistance of the work. Um, I remember when I first went to the training, the assistants seemed to think that they needed to do something when they came by your table. They needed to impart something uh, in you or to you in a way that seemed to me a bit mechanical. It seemed like some of the assistants wasn't quite sure what their role was. Um, in the later years, what I noticed with Marion is that she would allow space for the people who were working, the people who were being observed, to find their way. And she left it to that person who was doing the work the space to ask for help when they needed it. And a lot of time it wasn't a gesture, or it wasn't a verbal request for support, but it was like, and sometimes it was energetically um, asked for. And so the assistant would come nearby and they would be welcomed in to help the person who was doing the work. Um, and it involved quite a bit of intuition on the part of the assistants as well as a part of the teachers to kind of sense that someone could use some support. And so she was careful about leaving the impression that you know, you being an assistant or you being a teacher, know best, than the person who's working. I think what she really wanted to impart is that what was needed is to gain your confidence that you're able to touch people in a way that was supportive, communicative, in a way that make them much able to connect with people.
Mm. In that way, it seems really analogous to what we're doing as practitioners on the table. And I wonder, for the community who doesn't know what Rosen method is, could you could you describe what Rosen is?
Um, when that question come up, you could answer it a different way at a different time, or a different person asking the question. Um, but I think one of the components of the Rosen work that would make people understand more of what it is that it's a way of communication with people in terms of how to be present and how to help someone else be present in their being. Um, I think, um, one of the characteristics of the Rosen method is one of them is a touch without an agenda, touch without you know having some attachment to what your touch produces in that person. And it's not unlike communicating with your neighbor about various things that go on in your life, go on in their life. Um, and it doesn't, like I said, it doesn't have an agenda. It doesn't have an attachment to, how you communicate with a person through touch. It is received. Um, and I think that a major component of it is, uh, being seen, and also allow yourself to observe, your surroundings. Notice, how to notice your posture, how to um, see in a posture or see in the presence of someone, what's being communicated or some idea of what's been communicated between people. And I think it's about sharing our knowledge of, our environment, of, people who we communicate with, how we communicate with, our surroundings. And it's very natural in that way. And I think the Rosen method is also highly intuitive. There's a spiritual component to it. Marion Rosen, when asked about that in the early years, she said she wouldn't know, she didn't know about that, the spiritual component. And in the later years, she shared some things in her life that, made it certain that, she understood the importance of the spiritual component of the work.
So are you saying that she was probably aware of it earlier but chose not to comment on it until later?
I think I think she operated in such an annoying presence in her work and how she communicated with people. There was no concern of hers um, of how what would be the outcome of the work.
So you've talked a little bit about what Rosen method is. You've touched on a spiritual component. What does this look like when you're actually with clients? You have such a rich wealth of experience as a practitioner. So I wonder if you might be able to speak to that in some way. What it looks like in the room.
I think a big component of the work is observation. I remember someone sharing that if when Marion's clients come into the room, the session starts before they get on the table because she's observing something through their posture, through their communication. Give her kind of a sense of where they are, and um, so I think observation can be often underestimated in terms of the work. Your posture communicates a lot. Your movement communicates a lot. Um, through the course of the training, we would have these observations that we would do with people walking across the room, and you probably have experienced that. Um, but I also took a course in anatomy of movement through Eva Ras from Sweden, and she would teach anatomy of movement, and she would go into detail, body posture, how people walk when certain things are being communicated or are not being communicated or held back. Um, so yeah, I think observation is a main component, is a major component of the work. Um, yeah.
Percy, I know that Marion Rosen used to say that. Well, let me turn off my video in case this freezes. Marion Rosen used to say that Rosen is about contacting the unconscious through the musculature. And I wonder, in your experience, what makes Rosen different than therapy or massage? Why would someone uh, why would someone seek out you for Rosen to contact the unconscious versus trying these other methods of wellness?
I think I think touch produces such a powerful communication um, uh, that it cannot be rivaled through just verbal communication. I think it's a deeper level. Um, I think that, what is communicated through touch is, like they say, unconscious. The person may be holding something that gets released through touch that may or may not get released through a verbal communication, or it gets both, rather than just verbal communication or just touch. There's the dialogue part of the Rosen method that shares with the client, what you're sensing, checking in with them of what their sense of what we're noticing in their body. And then I think the idea about unconscious through touch is that something can get released, something can be realized in the body when it's touched, and on a deeper level.
You were talking about the touch and how touch communicates such a different thing than reading with talk for the connection and the witnessing.
Yeah, I could expand more on that. One of the components of the work is having a sense of anatomy. And anatomy is a major component of the work. And Marion Rosen pointed out various musculature in the body that holds various emotions. And some of the things, traumas, you know, troubling life experiences can get buried in the musculature. And when that musculature is contacted in a way that's not judgmental, is a welcoming touch, those unconscious holding can be released and often do get released that way.
I know that in Rosen method, we're not prescriptive, but Marion did teach that there can be certain kinds of themes held in different parts of the body. Could you speak to that a little bit? The common themes that might be found, but also how it's a unique experience with each client.
Hmm. Well, the uh, the neck, for example, is said to be an area of trust, behind, the neck, behind the head, basically. And that comes from an infant when they're born. Their C-spine needs to be protected until it's developed enough, that musculature is developed enough. And so that is a major place in the body where trust is resides. Um, and the shoulders is responsibility. As you can be carrying too much on your shoulders, and your shoulders is always on alert. For burdens that you're carrying on the shoulders, and the vigilance that is held there if the shoulders are called on too much for responsibility. And then the hips are considered the pleasing muscles. When young girls are coming up, generations back, and maybe even some now. They have this idea that young women should be careful about allowing their hips to move when they walk, for fear of communicating availability, those kinds of things. And so, thus, into our psyche, sometimes, you get you're self-conscious about how you walk, for fear of having that communication be transmitted. And it can go the same way for men as in women. And then, how our posture is held, as like the pelvis, if the pelvis is tilted forward, that's seen as, some communication of, uh, you know sexual trauma or abuse. Um, and then, and vice versa, if the pelvis is tilted back, then that's sort of a retreat of sorts. But it's all kind of communication that goes on with, the tilting of the pelvis.
I
Yeah.
wonder, Percy, the breath is also such a central part of a Rosen session. Could you speak to the role of breath, how you're perceiving that during a session as a practitioner?
Yeah, the breath, is resides in the diaphragm. Where the diaphragm is tight, meaning that, there's some there's some fear, there's some sense that, the breath needs to be controlled. Um, when the diaphragm is free to move, the breath energizes and provides oxygen for the whole body. If it's held, it can cause us to not be relaxed. It can cause us to, be fatigued easier because the body is not, it is being held basically. And so, a major component of our work is to work on the diaphragm, to, kind of, work on the areas where the diaphragm is connected to the rib cage, to allow that area to relax so that the breathing can flow through the body without effort. And so the diaphragm, is said to be a container, of fear and anxiety when it's not allowed to move freely.
When I was going through my training, I feel like I heard Sarah Webb mention that the diaphragm was sort of the final frontier, that it was somehow connected to when you've been working with a client for a while, and sometimes there's that transcendent, or some people might call it spiritual experience.
Hmm.
In your work as a practitioner, is it similar, or have you had a different experience with that?
Uh, oftentimes in my work on the diaphragm, the person on the table, would share that, they have been able to relax, easier or more deeply than they ever have. And oftentimes, clients would share that they, slept like 12 hours, for example, for the first time in in their life, or for a very long time. And so the diaphragm, for them in these cases, was something that allowed them to relax enough so they really got a sense of what relaxation is, a whole new meaning to them of what relaxation is.
I know Marion used to speak a lot about how Rosen can give you an experience of sort of the person you're meant to be, the person that you can be at your highest potential. And it sounds similar to what you're speaking about.
Yeah, and she also said that clients would often share that they felt closer to God when the diaphragm relaxed completely.
Do you have any sense of why that connection is there? Did you ever have that experience yourself when
I
you were a
did.
client?
I did. Yeah, I would periodically be used as a demonstration by Marion, and I could notice that when my diaphragm was fully relaxed, my head would move side to side without effort. So the breathing moved the whole body without effort, without any assistance with moving it. And so it was kind of a vibrational effect through the body when the diaphragm is relaxed. And the diaphragm movement, when it's in its full relaxation, is also compared to the jellyfish when it's swimming through the ocean. The floating, the natural, you know, gliding through the water is similar to how the diaphragm moves when it's freely relaxed and loose.
That sounds like a tremendous experience to have had and to have been able to experience Marion's hands directly.
Yeah.
What was it about your experiences on the table that that made you agree to learn when Marion invited you and and kept you committed throughout all of these decades to the work?
The experience that I had with receiving Rosen sessions, it refined and brought some of the other things I do in life to a whole new level. When I started to work, I was working as a water treatment operator, and when I became introduced to the Rosen work, my communication with my coworkers and people that worked alongside me, it made I noticed a whole new reception of communication. Um, and not so long after I started my training in the Rosen method, I was promoted to supervisor of my unit. And attribute a lot of that to being able to communicate with people around me, and also being able to demonstrate, what it's like to be, free, in your job and what you do, and understanding, the things that we do, that we enjoy doing, can be a way of life, and that was where what I had um, observed with the Rosen method. And when I started to training, I was doing martial arts as I still do. I was teaching karate and tai chi, and it made my martial arts practice so much better because one of the main components that the Rosen method that Marion shared was that there's a relaxation intention in everything we do, and there's a timing involved with that. And I think that the component of the Rosen method that went into my martial arts, it helped me fine tune, what it is to be relaxed, what it is to be contracted, and the timing of that.
That's amazing. So that understanding, that embodied understanding of what it means to be contracted or not, that sounds like it had huge implications on your understanding of relationship when you step back into work, etc.
Hmm.
That's kind of profound. I know that talk therapies try to help people to heal relationships through CBT and other more cognitive verbal approaches, but to be able to heal and enhance the way that you show up in relationship through this muscular understanding of constriction, relaxing, that's pretty profound.
Yeah, it is. It is. Yeah, it's very profound. Yeah. Marion uh, did a demonstration that was profound in that way. There was this guy who was very muscular, and he stood before Marion. I don't know who shared this story, but anyways, he stood before Marion, and with one finger, she could push this guy over, and he was a very muscular guy, but he was contracted. And so, just a moderate amount of pressure applied to someone that's holding, you could topple them over because their whole body is pretty much frozen when they're contracted.
I wonder, Hersey, where do you see where do you see the work that you're doing going right now? Rosen and or how it integrates with the other parts of your work.
Well, I keep getting referrals from various people and clients coming because someone else has shared with them, what the work was for them. And that's a very, that's very organic, and it's a relative slow process. I am currently working on getting certified as a senior teacher, international teacher in the Rosen work, and I plan to do more Rosen introductory courses. But the exposure of the Rosen method to a larger environment is much lacking. And I intend to pursue a way of making it more known to people.
With how the world's going in this moment, why do you think Rosen method could be really valuable if we got it to the wider community at this moment in history?
I think it could be valuable in a way that people will come to know that we have much more in common than we do uncommon. And I think that it's a major um, communication modality, and I think it can help bridge the gap between people who think you know their way is the only way, or they're and on a, or they are shy about sharing who they are for fear of you know vulnerability, among other things. And through the course of the work and through the course of my training, I've come to understand that vulnerability can be a very powerful tool when you allow the vulnerability, knowing that your heart um, can be an indicator of what's when there's a need to contract, when there's a need to relax. And I think it will um, have us all have a better timing of how we communicate, how we carry ourselves.
Do you have any sense about how the Rosen community can do more outreach so that people know that resources like these are available?
Yeah, I think that we could do more introductory courses in various places. And I would like to, pursue spreading the Rosen work to some of the places in this country where, touch is not common. It's not seen as allowed. Uh, and, and namely, where I'm from in the South, that I know Rosen method is very foreign. Even massage in some places is seen as some kind of subversive activity or whatever. So I would like to see that expand across the world.
You brought up that working with men and being a male practitioner is so important. And I know earlier you spoke about how being different genders can sometimes impact different patterns of restriction in the body. When you originally brought up Marion wanting you to work with men, you had used the phrase weakest link. What did you mean by that?
The weakest link, meaning that for social progress in a society, uneven development can be restrictive in terms of how we advance in the world. And if women are more, more in contact with their emotions, with releasing their emotions, and men are held back, it can be not so productive in terms of how we move forward in social progress and in the world. Is that it's important to allow emotions to be released when they are ready to be released, and for the most part, it's accepted for women to openly release emotions, and men, have this training that to be strong, you have to hold back your emotions. It's important not to release emotions for fear of seen as being weak.
Mm, that makes sense. So, with that pattern of men being taught to hold back emotion, do you see that in the body, or is it just that the process of clients recognizing their emotion might be a little bit slower in that situation, or does it reflect in the body in any kind of way?
Yes, it does. It's reflected in the body, and I think the way that it's reflected is that you know uh, due to the disparity in the kind of work that are seen as being predominantly men, their musculature is much more held, and the depth of the musculature is different, and so it takes, in a lot of cases, a bit more work to really um, you get to the end point of the holding, and releasing those tightly held muscles. And there's also there's also an evidence of um, vulnerability or hesitation with men allowing those places in the body that we discussed earlier where various emotions are held, and you make contact with those muscles, and oftentimes you see the retraction or hesitancy in releasing those places.
Percy, is there anything I didn't ask you that you'd like to say that you think is important to say before we end?
Yeah, one of the things I would like to share is Marion Rosen had this uncanny ability to determine um, that there's a certain age that appears in the client's face while she's working, and that age to her brought up the thought of something significant happened in their life. And I find myself able to do that once in a while, to see a certain age. And that's when it's important to dialogue with the client because it can become something very key in terms of their ability to drop in to, their real self, their true being.
What kind of thing might you say to a client in that situation?
Well, I would either share with them that I'm noticing a certain age in their face that's showing, um, and yeah, I think that's what I would usually do. And then, most often they would say, "Well, that's what happened. This or that or happened when I was this age and stuff." And but Marion, she would go a step further and she would ask them, for example, so what happened when you were 11 years old?
Mm.
And she's noticing that age in the face and it's saying something in terms of, what, what is being revealed, what is showing up.
Do you think in that moment where the age is showing up in the face, is it because what happened to them at that age is so close to the surface?
Exactly. Yeah. And it's a way of the body communicating, with the practitioner, you know, they're showing, yeah. And so the unconscious, I think, is surface at that point.
That's really, really profound.
Yeah.
Well, Hersey, I really appreciate you sharing your time. You hold so much knowledge about Marion and about the Rosen method of bodywork. And it's a real gift to the community to hear your stories and to hear how you've come to understand the work over this period of time. So I'm really grateful you came.
You're welcome, Kate, and I'm so grateful that you're making an effort to make the work more known. I really appreciate you doing this.